While I was dodging mortar fire in Syria, scribbling letters home between patrols, Madison was busy redecorating her life. Those were her words. A month before I came back, she left a voicemail. I need a man with a future, not someone digging trenches. She didn't even say it to my face. That message echoed in my ear as I stood on the tarmac, dust still clinging to my boots, duffel heavy on my shoulder. 10 years passed. I built my life back from ashes. Name's Tyler Bennett. From broke, battle-scarred, and divorced, to founder of one of the fastest-growing security firms in the country. I never looked back until last night. College reunion. 10 years since we wore caps and gowns, pretending we had any idea who we were going to be. Held in the old campus ballroom. Crystal chandeliers. Free champagne. Everyone playing pretend like their lives hadn't come up short. I walked in, tailored suit, watch glinting, an entrance carved not by ego, but by fate. And there she was, Madison. Same bleached grin, same calculated eyes, but older. Draped on the arm of a mid-tier banker who looked like he cried during annual reviews. She laughed too loud, as if attention could fix aging. She hadn't seen me yet, but the room had. It was like someone cut the power, conversations died, forks froze mid-air. Every eye turned. On me. The guy they forgot. The voicemail ghost. Now the man from magazine covers. Then her head turned. Confusion first. Then shock. Then that smile. I expected regret. Maybe guilt. What I got was charm. Tyler, she said, like we'd just run into each other at Whole Foods. Wow. You look incredible. I didn't respond. Just stared at the hand she reached out with, like she still had some claim. The room held its breath. She gave a nervous laugh. You always were full of surprises. Oh, I had surprises, but not the kind she was ready for. I wasn't there to reminisce or gloat. I was there because 2 days ago, I got a call from Erica, her old best friend, the one who never liked me. But karma changes people. She told me everything I never asked to know. What Madison did while I was bleeding in uniform, while she waved flags and Facebook selfies. Beach shots. With her boss, Doug, a 52-year-old married real estate agent. And it wasn't just once. Erica laid it all bare. Hotel weekends. Spa days, for her mental health. Doug even stepped foot in my house. Slept in our bed. The same bed she'd FaceTimed me from. Good night, babe, while he pulled her close. You have no idea what she's done, Erica had said. And she'll try to come back. She knows you made it. Be careful, Tyler. She was right. That night, Madison found me. Like a magnet. And she brought her new accessory. His name was Sean. Handshake like a wet napkin. Insecure eyes. This is Sean, she chirped. My partner. He offered a hand. Pleasure, man. Maddie told me so much about you. I shook it, firm, steady. Looked him dead in the eye. Funny. She barely mentioned you. He blinked. Madison's smile twitched. You always had that dry wit. I leaned in, voice low. And you always had that fake loyalty. Her face hardened. Can we talk in private? She asked. I shook my head. I'd rather not. She reached for my sleeve. Tyler, wait. You don't understand. I pulled away. No, you don't understand. You threw away a man with fire in his chest for someone who sells condos. You picked sparkle over substance. This chapter's closed. I'm not here to fight. Just to let you see what you let go. I stepped out onto the balcony, needing space. My phone buzzed. A text from Erica. She's already asking around. Told someone you owe her. Said she made you. This was only the beginning. The worst betrayals don't come with slammed doors. They come with a smile. Betrayal doesn't always arrive with a bang. It creeps in on tiptoes. In silence. In pauses that stretch too long. In calls that go unanswered. I didn't lose Madison in a single moment. I lost her in fragments. It began 2 months before I deployed to Syria. She grew distant. Snapped easily. Her hugs felt more like obligations than affection. Arms around me like she was clocking out. One night, I told her I might not make it back. She didn't even flinch. Just looked at her phone and said, "Can you take the trash out before you leave tomorrow?" But I didn't see it then. Love makes you blind. Especially when you're bleeding in the desert for people who don't even remember your name. The truth didn't come until years later. After the reunion, after that fake smile, Erica's words wouldn't leave me alone. You've got no idea what she's done. She was right. I didn't. But I had to. Not because I still loved Madison. I didn't. I needed the truth. I needed something to shatter the illusion. Something to burn through the fog. We'd once shared a cloud account. She must have forgotten. I hadn't. I logged in. Photos. Dozens. Some innocent. Brunches, friends, sunlight smiles. Then I found the folder. SBA weekends. That's what she called them in her messages. Taking some time for myself, babe. You understand, right? Inside, images that made my gut twist. Hotel beds with rose petals. Champagne. Madison in a red robe. Doug beside her. Gray hair. Shirtless. Holding her like she was some trophy he'd won. Then the videos. Short, brutal. Them kissing. Her giggling. Whispers, phrases that used to belong to me. One video, she looked right into the camera and said, "I love this. It feels real." I froze it. That word, real. What did she think I was? A shadow? The timestamps told the whole story. This was during my final deployment. While I wrote letters in fear I wouldn't make it home, she was whispering sweet lies into a real estate agent's ear. And then, one more file. A Word doc. Divorce draft. Dated 2 weeks before I left the country. She'd already met with a lawyer. Had a plan. She wanted the house. The savings. My truck. One line stood out. I deserve compensation for years spent being a military wife. Compensation. She never even sent a care package. That night, I sat alone in the dark, screen glowing. The room cold. Silent. Except for the hum of betrayal pressing against my ribs like a steel weight. I didn't cry. Didn't yell. Just clenched my jaw until it ached. Ever felt the ground vanish beneath you? That was me. I sent one email, to myself. Subject, proof. Attachments, everything. Then I logged out. Not to forget, but to remember. Crystal clear. Because when someone shows up years later wearing that same smile like nothing happened, you better be holding the receipts. 3 days after the reunion, confrontation didn't ask permission. It showed up uninvited. I was reviewing a security contract when the intercom buzzed. "Mr. Bennett, there's a Madison here to see you." Should I send her in? She walked in like she belonged. Like she hadn't once wrapped herself in another man's sheets while I slept in sand. Hair perfectly styled. Heels sharp. Bag designer. Confidence, a mask. "Nice place," she said, eyeing the office like she was measuring the life she'd thrown away. I didn't offer a chair. Didn't sit. She shifted. "Tyler, I just wanted to talk. I feel like our last conversation." Our last conversation? I cut her off, cool and steady. "You mean the one where you played old friend like we weren't exes? Or the one where you ghosted me while I was in uniform, halfway around the world?" Her jaw clenched. "I didn't ghost you. That's not fair." I walked to my desk, tapped a key, turned the monitor. The folder opened. Spa weekends. Divorce draft, right there on the screen. Her face drained like someone pulled the power. "You still had access," she whispered. "I still had a memory," I said flatly. "Something you clearly lack." She drew in a shaky breath. "It wasn't like that. You don't understand what I was going through." "No," I snapped, stepping in. "You don't get to pull the what I was going through card. I was sleeping in a tent with rats, getting shelled by mortars while you were sipping champagne on silk sheets." Her jaw tightened. "You were gone, Tyler. All the time. I was alone. I was at war, Madison." Her voice rose. "And I was stuck playing the trophy wife to a man who could die any day. Do you know what that fear does to someone?" I stared at her. "You weren't afraid. You were bored." Silence. She looked away. I took a step back, the anger draining, left cold level. "Tell me it was worth it." "Doug." The lies. That voicemail. Her eyes darted. She blinked too fast. "Doug was a mistake." "No," I said quietly. "I was your mistake. Because I believed you." She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "Spare me. I'm not here for apologies. I just want you to know I know. Every lie. Every name. Every file. I kept it all." Her confidence crumbled. "What are you going to do?" she asked, voice small. "Nothing," I said. "You already did everything for me." I walked past her. "Open the door. You can go now. But before you do, hear this." She paused at the threshold. I met her eyes. "You didn't leave me for someone better. You left me for someone easier. That's not an upgrade. That's cowardice." She said nothing, just turned and walked out. No echo of heels. Just silence. I closed the door, sat down, and finally exhaled. The confrontation didn't bring peace, but it gave me power. She didn't win. She never did. She only borrowed a version of me I no longer am. And after she left my office, the silence she left behind, it didn't feel like peace. It felt like aftermath. That eerie stillness after a crash, when the glass has stopped shattering but your heart's still racing. That's betrayal. That night, I went home and sat on the floor. Didn't turn on the lights. Just leaned against the wall and let it bleed out. You think you know pain when you've seen combat, blood, death, the finality of loss. But betrayal? From someone who kissed you goodnight and meant none of it? That's a cut that finds bone. I kept seeing her face, hearing that message. I need a man with a future, not someone digging trenches. At first, I burned. A rage so hot I couldn't sit still. I wanted to break things. Find Doug. Let him feel what it's like to cross a soldier. But rage is just the surface. Underneath? Shame. Not from her choices, from mine. From the signs I ignored. The late-night texts. The new lingerie. The gym obsession. I told myself she was finding herself. Nah. She was rehearsing for someone else. And I believed her. Like a damn fool. I replayed everything. Vacations, holidays. Even the nights she'd run her fingers through my hair when sleep wouldn't come. Now it all felt staged. Like I'd lived in a movie, and she was the actress. I was the only one who thought it was real. That's when the doubt sank in. If she could lie so effortlessly, what did that say about me? Was I that easy to replace? Was I ever enough? The worst part wasn't the affair. It was the planning. She wrote betrayal like a business memo. Outlined it like a strategy deck. I wasn't a husband. I was a temporary contract. And still, God help me, some part of me missed her. That's the cruelest trick of all. The heart never reads the fine print. You miss someone who destroyed you, not because they earned it, but because your memories haven't caught up with the truth. I had to sit in that gap. Feel it. All of it. The shame. The hollow disbelief. The brutal realization that grief doesn't just follow death. It follows deception too. She didn't die, but the version of her I loved did. For weeks, I couldn't focus. Her shadow was everywhere. I'd open the fridge and remember her smoothie routine. Hear a song and suddenly I was in the passenger seat again, her singing off-key, laughing like the world was light. I hated it. Hated how someone who treated my heart like junk mail still echoed in my thoughts. But pain, if you let it, becomes your forge. It doesn't just break, it reshapes. I chose that path. I trained harder, body and mind. Cut out every poison string. Deleted the photos. Canceled the cloud. New phone. New locks. I changed my lock screen too. No more mountains she once said reminded her of me. Instead, forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it. I wasn't that man anymore. But maybe he needed to break, so someone stronger could rise. That night on my balcony, whiskey in hand, city lights flickering below me, I made a vow. She lit a match to my past. I'd use the flames to forge my future. Healing doesn't arrive with confetti. It's slow, uneven. Some nights are quiet, the ache dull. And in that quiet, you get clarity. You realize this is a choice. And I made mine. No more looking back. No more feeding a ghost. No more hoping she'd show up weeping, confessing regret. I didn't want closure. Closure's a myth, sold by people too scared to admit the story ended without a clean final line. Sometimes it ends mid-sentence. Sometimes it ends with silence, and that's enough. I wasn't going to let Madison linger in my life like a haunting. So I called my lawyer. We'd been legally divorced for years, but there were still loose threads. Shared accounts. Business paperwork from when she pretended to help build my company. Stock options she'd tried to claw credit for. Don, my lawyer, didn't even sound surprised. Told you she'd try to weasel back in. Cut her out of everything, I said. And we did. Changed the locks. Blocked her number. Cleared every legal tether. Rewrote the bylaws. Clean and sharp. Only one name on the business now. Mine. But there was one more decision. One deeper than lawyers or paperwork. What kind of man would I be now? Betrayal warps people. Makes them bitter, spiteful. Turns pain into poison. I wasn't going to be that guy. The one who turns every wound into a warning against love. That's not who I was. Not the soldier who used to write poetry beneath desert stars. So I did something unexpected. I walked into a therapist's office. No fanfare. No pride. Just the words. I think I need help letting go of someone who lied like it was breathing. Her name was Dr. Callahan. She didn't offer comfort. She offered clarity. She made me work. Asked the questions I'd buried. Made me unpack how I confused sacrifice with self-erasure. How I let loyalty become silence. How I thought love meant taking any hit without complaint. The more I faced, the more I rebuilt. I started mentoring other vets, guys fresh out, floating without direction. I knew that drift. That lostness. I wasn't going to let them walk it alone. And for the first time in years, I wrote again. Not texts. Not rage emails. Real writing. Honest. Raw. Some of it about Madison. Most of it about the man underneath all the dust. Yeah, the pain still visited. Late nights. Park benches. Couples laughing. A stranger calling out, Maddie, and my heart stalling out of instinct. But now, I didn't stay in that place. I let the moment pass. Grief is love with nowhere to go, but I was learning to give that love back to myself. Then one morning, I woke up, sunlight pouring through the blinds, and realized something simple, quiet, and powerful. I hadn't thought about her in days. And not with anger, not with sadness, just not at all. That's when I knew I'd made the right call. Not just to cut her out of my life, but to finally write myself back into it. Because healing doesn't mean the past stays buried. Sometimes it rises, fierce and unwanted, just when you start to feel whole again. That's exactly what happened a month after I thought I'd left Madison behind. It started with a text. Unknown number. Can we talk? It's important. I stared at it. No emotion. Just instinct. Delete. An hour later, another one. Please don't ignore me. I made a mistake. I know that now. Still nothing. Because she wasn't reaching out for me. She missed who she used to be when she had access to my life. My loyalty. My warmth. My world. Then came the email. Pages of emotional confessions. A monologue about Doug. How he turned cold. How she lost herself. How she never stopped thinking about the man who loved her at her worst. I almost laughed. Yes, she was at her worst. And yes, I did love her. But she wasn't thinking of me while she curled into bed with a man twice her age. Not when she sent voicemails across oceans while I stood in boots and blood. One line stuck with me. I saw you at the reunion and realized, you've become everything I hoped you would. That sentence said everything. She didn't love me. She loved the fantasy of who I'd become. Not the soldier who wrote poems from war zones, but the man who could afford silence. And penthouses. And forgetting her. Still, curiosity tugged. Not because I wanted her back, but because I wanted her to see I wasn't the same fool she walked away from. So I agreed. One meeting. Public place. Neutral ground. We met at a cafe downtown. She walked in wearing a beige coat, designer bag slung over her shoulder, confidence painted on in layers. But I saw the cracks, the strain in her smile, the desperation in her eyes. Tyler, she breathed, sliding into the seat. You look wow. I didn't return the compliment. Just nodded. You said this was important? She exhaled. I know I don't deserve your time, but I needed to tell you I was wrong. About everything. About us. About you. I stayed silent. Let her talk. Doug wasn't who I thought. He made promises. Big ones. But he never delivered. Not like you. You always showed up. Don't romanticize me. I said, calm but sharp. You didn't just leave me, Madison. You erased me. While I was risking my life overseas, you were pulling the plug. Her lips parted. But nothing came out. I leaned in, voice low. Let me guess. The lifestyle didn't match the fantasy? The thrill wore off? Doug stopped calling you beautiful once routine set in. Tears welled in her eyes. I miss who I was when I was with you. And there it was. The truth. That's the problem, I said. You should have valued who I was. But you didn't. You only liked your reflection when I held you up. Silence. She reached across the table, slow, uncertain. I pulled my hand back. You don't get to miss me now. She wiped her cheek, voice cracking. Do you hate me? I took a breath. No. Hating you would mean I still care. Then I stood, left a few bills on the table, and walked out. Out into the cold, crisp evening. And I felt lighter, not because I watched her cry, not because I got the last word, but because, for the first time, I didn't need her pain to prove my healing. She came back hoping I'd be the man she left. And in a way, she was right. I had become everything she once hoped I'd be. But by the time she figured it out, I was already too far ahead. I didn't look back. Not at her. Not at the past. Not at the version of me that used to ache for her attention. Madison became what she always should have been, a lesson. And finally, I was done learning. Funny how clarity comes. Not in the breakdowns. Not in the darkness. But in the quiet that follows. When the storm is gone, and you're still standing. That next morning, I opened the blinds and let the sunlight pour in like it hadn't in years. For once, I didn't think of her. I thought of me. I grabbed my old notebook, the one from before the war, before the collapse. Dusty cover. Yellowed pages. I flipped to a blank one and carved out 5 words in sharp, deliberate ink. She doesn't define you anymore. And I meant it. Day by day, I started living like it. My workouts sharpened. My business expanded. I hired more veterans, men and women who needed more than a paycheck. They needed purpose, brotherhood, family. We weren't just building a company. We were building a mission, a legacy, a tribe. And then something unexpected happened. People started respecting me, not because of my income or image, but because I'd walked through fire and came out forged, not burned. I got invites to speak, to mentor, to share my story, not of betrayal, but of rebirth. And somewhere in all that growth, I met Leah. No drama, no mask, no pretending to be impressed by the empire I'd built. She respected it because she respected me. I didn't tell her about Madison at first. Didn't want this new chapter smeared with old ash. But as time passed and trust rooted itself, I told her everything. The deployments, the silence, the betrayal. She listened. No flinching, just nodded and said, "Sounds like she tried to break a lion with words." And right there, that was the shift. For the first time since everything unraveled, I didn't feel broken. I felt seen. Not by someone who needed to dim me to glow, but by someone who saw my scars as proof of survival. One night, Leah and I sat out on the balcony, wine in hand, city stretching out below us. She turned to me, voice soft but curious. "If you could go back, would you stop yourself from marrying her?" I sat with that. The betrayal, the waiting, the heartbreak. Then I shook my head. "No," I said, "because the man she broke, he built the one you're sitting beside now." She smiled, leaned in. "Then I should probably thank her." I chuckled. "Nah, she doesn't get credit. Just the memory." And just like that, it was real. The healing, the peace, the new chapter. Not driven by revenge or ego or proving anything to anyone. Just becoming the man she never deserved. But someone else finally does. It's strange how the worst thing to ever happen to you can become the best thing that ever changed you, if you let it. Looking back, it's not the pain I remember most. It's the transformation. Madison didn't just break my heart. She broke the illusion I'd been living in. And once that shattered, I saw everything clearly. Who I was, what I needed, what I'd never settle for again. I used to think betrayal was the death of love. Now I know. It's the birth of self-respect. Truth is, there was a version of me who would have taken her back, accepted her half-truths, forgiven her if she cried just right. But that version? He's gone, buried in the trenches she mocked. The same trenches that built the man who now stands 10 stories above her, watching her fade while he rises. I don't hate Madison. I don't have to. Her punishment isn't my rage. It's my absence. She wakes up every morning knowing she tossed something real for something temporary. Loyalty for lust. A future for flattery. And while I'm building something sacred with Leah, Madison's chasing validation like a stray chasing headlights. Let her run. Because here's the truth most men never hear enough. It's not your fault she betrayed you. It's not because you weren't enough. It's because she was never built to carry what you were offering. Some women see you as a foundation. Others treat you like a ladder. The mistake is thinking they're the same. So here's my advice to every man who's been where I've been. Don't ignore the signs. If something feels off, it is. If stories don't line up, if her energy changes, if your gut whispers warnings, listen. Loyalty doesn't need secrets. And love doesn't hide behind passcodes and late-night work trips. 2. Don't beg for the truth. If you have to ask 10 times, you already know. Stop waiting for confessions. Start preparing for consequences. 3. Don't let betrayal define your worth. She didn't cheat because you lacked value. She cheated because she lacked character. Her decisions reflect her, not you. 4. Don't chase revenge. Level up. Your silence. Your growth. Your peace. That's the real revenge. Because nothing haunts a liar more than watching the person they tried to break become untouchable. 5. Don't carry shame that doesn't belong to you. You loved her. You stayed loyal. You showed up every day. That's not weakness. That's rare strength. Don't regret being real in a world obsessed with masks. And finally, 6. Let her loss be your lesson, not your legacy. You're allowed to bleed. You're allowed to cry. Just don't stay there. Heal, grow, build. And when you rise, rise with grace, not bitterness. You owe it to yourself to become more than the story she tried to write you out of. I know it feels like the end, But it's not. It's the beginning of the man you were always meant to be. So if you're reading this now, if you're in your version of that dark room I sat in years ago, hands trembling, heart shattered, wondering what the hell comes next, listen closely. She didn't break you. She revealed you. Now it's your move.